Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Smith. I'm a board member of GALA Choruses, and in my day job, I work as president at Berkshire Choral International, and I'm moderating today's roundtable conversation. Our goal is to share some updated ideas and priorities for helping choruses sustain themselves through the COVID crisis. I think most of our choruses did a great job reacting and adapting to COVID as it hit and unfolded last winter. But I also don't think any of us were prepared for the resiliency we would need to sort of go from what we thought was a short-term crisis to what's now a chronic problem that we're living with. So today we'll talk about how our survival strategies and planning may need to evolve to keep our organizations alive and hopefully thriving until more normal, whatever normal looks like, until more normal days arrive. So let me have each of our panelists introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll get started. So Jeff, why don't we start with you, and I'll let people just jump in. I'll moderate if we need to.
Of course. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Heine. I'm the executive director of the San Diego Gay Men's Chorus. My pronouns are he, him, and his.
I'll go. I'm Michael Tate. I'm a singing member of the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus, and I'm also, as of January 1, 2021, the board chair of GALA Choruses. And my pronouns are he, him, and his. Delighted to be here, and I will hand off to Kathleen.
Hello, Kathleen Hansen. I am the artistic director of the San Diego Women's Chorus, she, her, and GALA Artistic 411 advisor.
I'll go next. I'm Eve Campbell, Executive Director of Voices of Note, which is the Atlanta Gay Men's Chorus and the Atlanta Women's Chorus. And I'm the 411 Advisor to Boards of Directors for GALA Choruses.
I'm Christopher Dugo, the Executive Director of the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. My pronouns are he and him, his. And delighted to be here, and I will pass it off to my dear friend, as I feel I often do, actually, Craig Coogan.
And I love taking your passes, Chris. I am Craig Coogan. I'm the executive director of the Boston Gay Men's Chorus, he, him, his, and I am delighted to participate in today's talk.
Great. And as we record this, we'll be joined in a bit by my colleague, Paul Caldwell from the Seattle Men's Chorus, Seattle Women's Chorus. And I neglected to say my pronouns are he and him. So glad to see all of you. I wish we were in the same room together because I miss seeing you. And as you can see on our screen now, my friend Paul is jumping on to join us. We're scheduling across, I think, 3 different time zones today. Paul Caldwell, hello there, welcome.
Hey, baby, how you doing?
Good, we have just introduced ourselves and our pronouns and where we work.
I'm Paul Caldwell, he, him, his, and I am sitting in beautiful Seattle where it is sunny today.
I don't miss the rain, I have to tell you that, friend.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so what I'm hoping is not to be a freewheeling conversation, but I am going to try to steal this a little bit in a direction which will take us from a conversation of when we think normal or some version of it might return, talk a little bit about what we think our members and organizations need from us and to survive, and then we'll zoom outward a little bit to thinking about our audiences and supporters. So the only thing that I know is that we now know what not normal looks like. Chorus America did a recent survey that showed that 75% of choruses in the US are doing no in-person activities, and about 50% are currently predicting that they think the earliest they can return to in-person rehearsals will be fall of 2021. So there are many unknowns. None of us are medical experts to my knowledge. But based on what you currently know about the vaccine rollout and recovery efforts, I'm curious to know what you're thinking, what your organization's thinking is. When do you think you can resume in-person activities, and sort of what's the range that you're thinking about? And again,
I don't know if you just want us to jump in. Is that?
That's
so obviously we don't have a crystal ball, right? And I've tried to kind of organize things in a flexible way so that when we are able to come back, we will be able to do that without too much of a hiccup. We actually formed a reopening committee, which is starting to look at what's going to happen when that time comes. And taking a page out of the playbook from like Choral Friends in New Zealand, for example, it doesn't go from meeting on Zoom to standing on packed risers together. So one of our big challenges is our meeting space kind of barely fits us all shoulder to shoulder anyway. So thinking about things like, we are definitely going to be virtual through this summer. We're going to put on a spring show. We are most likely going to put on a virtual Pride show. We're hoping that some sort of change will happen by fall. So if I was going to say like hoping for standing in the same room with other people or something like that, hoping for a fall.
This is Jeff. I'll go next since like Kathleen and I are neighbors. Essentially, we're in the same city and keeping track of the city and county guidelines as well. Basically, yeah, it's mirroring what Kathleen is saying, and it sounds like what the Chorus America survey is saying. It's working on spring and summer virtual, possibility of returning in the fall, but knowing that we have to look ahead in terms of we can't base coming back around the date of performance. You have to look back and make the decision based on what we know now. We have to start rehearsals. We have to start planning music on this date, and on that date, how do things look?
So here in Boston, I have a contingency after contingency after contingency. So, we have hope that Dr. Fauci and the vaccines will allow for a holiday 21 cycle. I think the practical reality is that in a group that brings 200 to 250 people together in close proximity, we are particularly dependent on our venues to allow not only just rehearsal space, but performance space. And the major performance venues that can house our chorus in the city have indicated that they are not planning to reopen in calendar 21. So that allows us to think outside the box and look at alternate venues, but there is a limitation given our size. We also, Ruben Reynolds, our music director, and I have had numerous conversations and sort of following a little of what Kathleen said, is that you can't go after a year and a half or 2 years of having not gathered and not sung and think that you can put a concert cycle together in 8 or 10 weeks. So we are realizing, recognizing that as the various elements come into play, it's likely we're going to want to add 4 to 6 weeks to the first rehearsal cycle, which may well mean that we are looking at a 2022 return.
Anyone with a different experience or expectation to add to that?
Not
different,
really. I haven't spoken. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead, Eve.
No, please.
Please. No, all yours, Eve. I insist.
Okay, I'm nothing different from me other than I will say that Georgia is number 50 in the rollout of the vaccine, so God only knows. I do have some strong feelings about people being vaccinated if they're going to participate, but we can talk about that probably in another segment. But no earlier than next holiday concert, and if it goes to March, then it goes to March.
I believe here in San Francisco, we're in the similar vein as Boston, and we're all hoping and wishing for a return later this fall. But I think it's we have to be cognizant of the fact that there are, aside from just, and as Kathleen mentioned, this will be this will be a sort of an incremental process of how we bring groups back together, and for us in particular, and I'll just speak for us, but I know that we all have rehearsal spaces. we're also having to address the ventilation issues in our space, so that they provide a safe and clean atmosphere for our singers. And we've also started to have that conversations with our symphony hall and the secondary theater, which we form in Sidney Goldstein, as to, you know, how they're addressing their ventilation issues, especially in, you know, a theater like the Sidney Goldstein, which is quite old and only sort of half renovated. The bottom, as Michael Tate can attest to. And so there are, you know, I think those are significant issues as well that we are going to have to contend with. And we heard back from the Sidney Goldstein that they also plan a very slow rollout. And when they do, their theater will not be at capacity. So what does that mean for us going in, knowing the expenses? So I think there are a number of you know, of issues, besides just vaccination, and herd immunity, and being able to stand side by side, that we'll also need to be looking at and contending with in the next, you know, 8 to 10 months.
And people can continue to chime in with your time frame if you want, but let me take Eve's bait there. And I'm curious what you're thinking in terms of, have you yet thought about policies? Would you require singers and participants to have proof of vaccination? And what are you looking in the sort of public health landscape? What will be the clues that tell you that it's safer to come back and start to sing together?
Well, I do feel, this is my personal feeling, it's not been discussed at the board level, but I do feel people need to be vaccinated. And if they're not willing to do that, you know, we're a private corporation, and, you know, they can either sing or not sing, up to them. But I do feel like we need to require that. And in terms of the what's in the landscape, I think it's going to be just being cognizant of what's happening in our communities. You know, right now, today, I live in a little tiny county of about 300,000 people. And yesterday, there were 300 new diagnosed cases of COVID, which is huge. So a very high percentage for such a small place. So we're just going to have to be very cognizant of what's happening in the landscape around us, and use a lot of good common sense and follow, you know, I mean, really, legally, we just have to follow our local public health departments and the CDC. Beyond that, I don't, you know, I'm no expert. So maybe some of you will have some more better ideas.
Well, I'll follow up really quickly in that we do have a task force that we set up last year, and as a part of that task force, there's a cohort of medical doctors and professionals who actually work in the healthcare system, and in we have several specialists as well, and so they're meeting later this month to look over all of the new data, and start to sort of provide some preliminary suggestions and roadmaps onto how we could open, and then we're bringing that to the entire task force. So once we're able to get through that process, we'll be happy to share that information. But we are also thinking, although it hasn't been discussed at the board level yet, or any sort of level, just in one-on-one conversations that we've had with each other, that we will also require people to be vaccinated.
I think, you know, the vaccination question, one way I look at it is how we've behaved in the past, you know, where it's almost an assumption that a third of your chorus is going to catch the flu when you do the holiday concert every year, right? And people are going to be coming to your concerts with bad head colds. And we just have this acceptance of transmission. And that's something we're going to have to get over and look for ways to mitigate that and stop that. So for us, I think, yeah, it will be vaccinations. It will be closely watching what the county is recommending, what the state is recommending. In fact, that would be a recommendation to everyone who's listening is, if you haven't already, look to see if your local, state, or county governments are providing any sort of updates that you can sign up for and get periodic updates to, because facts are going to be very important. You know, it's one thing that I manage is, people will say, well, hey, I heard this is happening. And I'm like, well, that's kind of irrelevant to to our planning. We have to make sure that we're getting accurate facts and using that information. So Chris's, what they're doing in San Francisco around a task force, I mean, that's an excellent solution. But at the bare minimum, try to sign up and look for updates that can help you with your decision making at your choruses.
As we look into-
Likewise, go ahead.
As we look into the question of required vaccinations, obviously we need to look deeply into the law, but one thing that we've really wrestled with is then how can we keep it an inclusive environment? For example, if people have real medical reasons why they cannot get one. And obviously we've learned some great things on rehearsing virtually this way, but we have the safety of everyone. We have a handful of people who may not be able to participate fully because of that. And that's a very challenging question. I think one that we shouldn't gloss over as we move forward, even, talking about things like requiring extended use of masks or outdoors, or, have a satellite group of people working somewhere else remotely. So they're not just by themselves. I think it's going to be time to get a little bit creative while also keeping an eye towards absolute safety.
Following up on what Kathleen's just said, we are anticipating, or we've discussed requiring vaccinations. The issue that stems from that decision is what we are in continued research and dialogue about, which is similar to what Kathleen said, which is, as an organization that thrives on creating a welcoming environment and inviting people in, we're very committed to keeping that ethos. We also recognize what our strength is. We are a performing arts, social justice, member-driven organization. We are not a healthcare organization. Therefore, with the HIPAA rules and all of the complexities around that, I do not want myself, my staff, or our volunteers to be taking people's temperatures, like getting into this level of personal intimacy on healthcare issues that I think is very complex, and we don't have expertise in that. So what we've been doing here is looking at what works in our other organizations that we're affiliated with. And we're affiliated with a number of universities and colleges, as many of our choruses are around the country. And at least here in Boston, they have created a number of testing protocols, a number of electronic processes that allow people to move in and around. And so we are in conversation with them, perhaps piggybacking on some of their systems, so that that becomes a way that we are not having to get into anybody's personal information. The other interesting program that I've been looking into is that Ticketmaster is doing a partnership with Clear Health Pass. And the basic idea is that if you've bought a ticket and you go to a venue, when they scan your ticket to let you in, it is tied into the Clear Health, which is an independent company that is tied into your healthcare to make sure that you have the vaccination. So it is doing that, and it's doing it in a way that protects privacy. So I am confident that that is an extremely expensive system and not viable for most of our choruses. However, if that's where the big people are beginning to play, I'm confident in the entrepreneurial nature of the world that there will be similar solutions. So we believe, in summary, that you've got to be vaccinated. We are going to make sure that people provide a level of personal information that protects them, and trying to do it in a way that keeps our welcoming environment.
Anyone else want to get in on this part of the conversation, sort of what we're looking for in terms of public health, or how we think the early days of rehearsals might the structure of that might be different. I want to let people get in on that, and then I'll move us along in a further direction.
Well, I'm kind of right there with where most large groups are. There's only so many spaces that we have available, for routine rehearsals, and for 125 to 150 men, there's no way that it's going to be socially distance appropriate, if that's still necessary when we start back. So, we're going to have to be willing to be creative or wait until we feel truly safe. I don't know any other way around that. We can't just, you can rehearse outside, but we all know singing outside sucks. So it's going to be tough.
Absolutely.
So following up on that, Eve, I think I'd want to ask Paul, because I've talked to Ruben a bit about this, and I agree that bringing 250 people back on day one is really challenging. So one of the things that Ruben and I have talked about, and Paul, I'd love your feedback, is maybe we bring the tenors ones back first on one day, and instead of like a one rehearsal a week, all of a sudden we're having 3 or 4 rehearsals because we are bringing people back by section, which of course there's an infrastructure, there's all that, but artistically I'd be curious what your thoughts are.
I'm kind of operating in a wait and see mode. I mean, I have 3 plans. One is reopen, like we're safe, we can return. Perhaps unlikely, but that's one plan. Another plan is reopen light, which is figure out how to do smaller groups in larger spaces. And the third plan would be remain virtual. My personal feeling is if I do reopen light, I would rather do small groups of multi-sections, because I think that is what the singers miss most. You know what I'm saying? To reopen with, oh, geez, y'all, we get to have sectional rehearsals. Isn't that fun? I mean, if the rule is I can have 50 people there, then I would personally rather have 50 people singing TTBB than 50 people singing T2. That's just the way that I'm looking at it. But I'm really in a wait and see mode, and I'm not, I mean, first of all, I'm sort of completely obsessed with putting together a show now. And once I have my arms around that, I'll be more willing to think about September, December, whatever. I think the real question is about audiences, because I don't personally feel that I mean, yes, there is benefit to getting the singers together when we can get them together. I'm not discounting that, because God knows nobody misses that any more or less than I do. But a whole lot of machinations, unless I know that there is actually going to be a show that we can perform for someone, I'd rather do something else. Like to get together and rehearse with 35 or 50 people because we love to sing is very different than getting together and trying to figure out a way to put together a show before we know if we're going to be able to go into a hall and have an audience. So I think the reopening light for me is more about the care and feeding of the singers than it is about production, because until such time as we know we can produce, I don't want to go into production preparation mode with my singers.
Let me pick up on that point, Paul, and ask folks, given that it appears that we all think we're going to be in remote mode for a significant amount of time longer, what are the things that you're doing that's working well? What are some things that you've tried that you're like, I'm kind of tired of that, or I want to drop that? As we think about our colleagues in choruses around the country, I'd like to hear your experiences and advice about, let's look ahead the next 6 months. What's working well, what's not working so well?
I can jump in. I found that, with all of its limitations, it's nice for singers and for me to have a goal to work towards. So we're not just getting together and doing community sing-alongs, but we're producing actual goals. And for us, that looks like virtual productions. We've decided to do another full show in the early summer, late spring. And but we've certainly learned from the last time we did this, where everything was a little bit hectic and rushed. We've certainly learned that maybe working on fewer songs at a time than we would in a regular season, so we can kind of space out the learning and space out the recording. It's just a very different method of learning. And that seems to keep people engaged. So we're not working on the same song for a million weeks and then recording all of them at the end and stressing everybody out. And that we've gotten pretty good feedback on that. And I think not just from the members, but from the audiences who enjoyed that concert feel, even if we can't be together.
I can jump in too. The one thing I've learned is that it's not a one size fits all, and it's largely like not just what works for the different groups, but what works for the different directors. I mean, there's probably no one that I have talked more frequently to about what we're doing and how to do it than Kathleen. And I think Kathleen and I are doing very different things, and that's fine. We still commiserate about what works and what doesn't work. I made a decision that I did not think I could emotionally tolerate trying to teach new repertoire on Zoom. So I did an entire virtual holiday show that was built on music that the chorus had sung in the last 3 seasons, so that I would at least have a core of singers who were familiar with it. And also the practicality that then I already had rehearsal tracks for all of that music. So that was a huge step that I skipped. And that show still made me cry and wail and gnash my teeth so much that I decided that, moving forward in June, I'm still sticking with the old rep, y'all. And I think I may be the only one doing that, and that is fine. Like, if other people want to teach new music on Zoom or figure out the other platforms to use, that's great. And we don't have to be doing it all the same. I think sometimes our singers are peering over each other's fences so much that they think, well, so-and-so is doing this, why aren't we doing that? It's what works for us, and it's what works for the directors and infrastructure that we have. And I found that the stick with old rep, where we already have rehearsal tracks. And I had some singers in that holiday show who were brand new, like their first concert ever got canceled, and they still learned every song for the holidays and submitted me a video. I had other people who had sung every single song because they have been in the chorus, since 1906, and they still didn't submit videos. So just give and take, but I'm sticking with the old rep because that's working for me. I am doing Zoom. I mean, I don't know. I don't even want to call it rehearsal, but using the rehearsal tracks on Zoom to touch up the music or review the music and then set them dates. I also have done okay, we're reviewing 2 songs at a time, and then I set dates for recording those songs, and then I move on. So this whole business about that we typically do, we come in a rehearsal, and in that rehearsal, we might rehearse 8 songs or 12 songs. No, that's just too. So that's the way I've approached it, and it's worked for me.
And to bring in some of the administrative and board folk, what are some of the member care and feeding programs that are working well, or new things that you might be thinking about trying?
I'll share about that. One of the things that we instituted was what we call chorus conversation, which is during our Monday night regularly scheduled rehearsal, as opposed to 3 hours. It's only 1, but it's been mostly a conversation. There are Monday nights. I mean, actually, sometimes it's gone into an hour and a half, where then it branches off into sectionals after that. But mostly a conversation, and the topics are so wide ranging. We've had COVID experts that have spoken. we've had just sort of celebrities from within the San Francisco community, but it's become a space of celebration, of connection, really feeding the members' soul, as well as, I will say, the staff's soul, right? It's our connection it's our only connection at times. And we are, I think, such a huge organization, and we have sort of lots of tentacles. And a couple of the organizations within the organization, the Divas, as well as the group Forte. Forte really sort of sets up the kind of the social element of the chorus. And I think at some points every night of the week there's something that you can plug into, everything from just from watching a movie together, support meetings, Michael, help me here, workouts. I mean, like, you can literally there's just a plethora of things that you can plug into during the week to stay connected, and some of them do it all. Some of them, some members just and some have stepped away and said, hey, when we start rehearsing again in person, we'll be there, but this medium isn't just for me, and we respect that as well. But I think we average about 100 singers every Monday night, which is kind of extraordinary that we continue to have that sort of engagement. Is there anything you would add to that, Michael?
No, I think you've hit the high points. I mean, I will say from I won't call it doom and gloom, but perhaps some things that have been challenging from my perspective, both as being on the GALA Choruses board and knowing how we're trying to support, but really just as this Michael Tate singer. I have a lot of friends who, this is a really tough time. And I mean, I think everyone on this call gets it, but people who are really struggling. And I mean, we're of a size that we have this sort of tap in, tap out. We all have a card that you get when you join the chorus, so that no one's standing there with a piece of paper checking you in. You can just sort of tap yourself in so we know who's attending rehearsals. And that's mostly just to sort of make sure that we're kind of keeping track of people, and people hopefully aren't missing too many rehearsals. And I think, as Chris pointed out, we're getting about 100 or so people. Now that's probably maybe 35 to 40% of our singers. So I feel like there are a lot of people who, and I'm sure it's the same for your choruses, who slipping through the cracks sounds a little harsh, but who we don't really know sort of how they want to be engaged. Do they want to be engaged? Have they left town? I mean, everyone's so virtual and transient. It's a little distressing. So from that perspective, I think, to echo some of what Paul talked about from the singing perspective, what this has really shown a bright light on for me as a section leader is, like, I think there are a lot of people who truly depend on sitting next to someone and around people who have that vocal strength to help them through. So you can put all the rehearsal tracks together without the rigor of that weekly and sometimes bi-weekly rehearsal, and being in that community of other singers. I think a lot of people have pulled back because they're just like, I don't feel equipped to just do this on my own. Like, I don't feel that same support. And you can email me, you can Zoom me, you can send me the track, but I'm sitting in my 400 square foot studio in a perhaps iffy part of town on my own, trying to do this. And that's just sort of musically and sort of emotionally and sort of spiritually just more than people can handle. So circling back to where we started, the notion of who will come back, what will they need? I think there almost is a value of coming together. And I don't know if, Paul, this is contrary or sort of supporting your thought, even if there is not a clear pathway to, we're about to do this performance that will raise X dollars, maybe even with people sitting every 5 seats. I think there are a great number of people who would clamor to come back just to create that music and have that community. Even if it's a glimmer of a hope that there'll be a performance, people would come back.
Oh, I absolutely agree. The question is, if it is a smaller group, I want to be clear about, are we getting together to sing because we want to be together, or are we building a show? And we all need to be clear about that, I think, because they're two different things.
Absolutely.
Anyone else want to jump in before I lurch us to a new topic?
I just want to say that
Greg, please.
Who first?
You, Eve.
Okay, my women's chorus artistic director is requiring less videos, and more audio. So that really helped the women, and the men are going to try that. Our men's artistic director is going to try that this next go round. But so many people are hesitant to tape themselves for the concert. They either don't feel confident or feel like, they're whatever reason, but they haven't minded turning in audio files. So that's something that's helped with our keeping our numbers up. And the women are probably at about 75 to 80% of their normal membership, and the men are probably about 65%. But the men are not interested in the games and the movies and the workouts, and there may be 6 people show up, we're doing it, and if those 6 people show up, that's fine. But as a whole, they're not interested in that. Actually, we did a survey, and they wanted to rehearse longer, so they really want to sing. Of course they'd rather sing in person. The women will be more active in the social stuff, but again, it's still much smaller numbers, but really pretty good participation in terms of music making.
Eve, I'm fascinated by that. I mean, the artistic director side of me went like this. Okay, so you had better participation if you didn't require video, if you just asked them to sing.
Yes, and then the people that didn't mind it and enjoyed doing the video, you saw our show. We got really creative with some of that kind of stuff. That wasn't even I think we did a couple of virtual choir things. That wasn't our whole membership at all. And we broke some numbers down, a third of you sign up for, different pieces. We did a lot of stuff like that so that it was less work on everybody. So anyway, yeah, getting creative.
Okay, so I had this other than situation, because this takes me now I'm going to leapfrog over to something else, see if anybody knows what it is. Okay, so I went to one of the licensing agencies to do virtual choirs for spring. And, I answered all the questions online, and then they sent me a personal email asking me all those same questions again that I had answered online already. But then there was a new question, which they wanted to know, was I going to use for the videos, was it going to be the Brady Bunch singing tiles, or was I going to use ancillary video and B-rolls and photography? And I'm like, okay, number one, what the hell does that matter to you? That's another topic of conversation. But what you're suggesting is that they recorded audio and then you used it to make a video that wasn't necessarily their faces. Does anyone know what the ramifications are for that on licensing? Because I was surprised by the question, and the truth is I don't know the answer, because my God, I'm just trying to get my singers to record it, and then I'll worry about what is the video going to look like, right? The question surprised me. Does anyone know anything about this issue?
Kathleen, I saw a nod. We'll let you answer, and maybe a nod, and then we'll go back up to Craig.
All I can say is anytime you put any images with recorded music, it requires a sync license. Now, the licensing agency can decide, something I've seen is they'll decide how much they're going to charge you based on what sort of thing you're going to do. Is it going to be a fundraiser? Is it going to be a free show? There is not a particular oversight law that tells them. So I've never heard that question before. I'm very fascinated by it. Are you going to be Brady Bunch heads or other video? I would definitely like to know what their reasoning is, but I would say that it's not unheard of for them to be like, what exactly are you using this for? Who is your audience? Are you making money? Are you charging for it? Things like that.
Yeah, they also asked me what other songs was I planning to do. And I'm like,
my goodness.
And why is that your business? But
super fascinating. I would like to hear more about that offline. So I make
We'll
a point
talk.
of that. I wanted to jump on what Eve was saying about singing versus video versus whatever. We've adopted a choose your own adventure model. You can come to rehearsal and just come to rehearsal. you can come to some of the rehearsals and not others. But I've designed it where it's like, okay, these are the 2 songs that I would like everybody to participate in if possible. The rest of them, we're just going to have people sign up for them. Magically, every single time I've done something like that, they just sort themselves quite well, and it's like magically balanced. But with the magic of audio engineering, like if I don't have quite enough alto 2s on this song, I can just bump that up a little bit. But similarly, we tell people you can submit audio, you can submit video, you can submit both. I track all of it through Google Forms towards, after we've introduced the music, I'm like, what is your intent? And they fill out a form, it populates into a spreadsheet. And then I have some other people follow up on that. That's not me, because I don't like doing that stuff. And they're like, are you now 6 weeks later actually going to turn in this song? Because heaven forbid I leave someone out who thought they turned in a video, because that's not a very fun situation. But having that flexibility of like, I want to participate, I have 3 kids at home and a job, what is that going to look like? I can submit an audio for 1 song, or I can submit only a video because said kids and dog are crying through the whole thing and I don't have a quiet place to perform. It's very much choose your own adventure model.
Great. Craig, I know you were going to jump in a bit ago.
Yeah, I get to 2 things that I was going to add, aside from just sort of ditto about small groups and the various types of gatherings that take place, is that we had have our membership services committee of singers, and then we've mixed in some board folk who are interested in doing it, do proactive outreach, so that for each cycle, so the last Pride cycle, the holiday cycle, and now here in what would ordinarily be a March cycle, every single member of the organization gets a telephone call, email, or text that says, how are you? Are you okay? So we don't just want to rely on people who feel like they can pop in. We too have seen some of our participations shrink on these groups. And I had a moment of panic. Oh my God, they're going away. Until we really talk to folks and realize that people have their posses, they have their groups, and they are staying connected chorus-wise outside of our infrastructure. And that's fine. That's lovely. And we as an organization still want to make sure that everybody's okay. We also have a number of medical doctors and psychologists and mental health professionals, and we have and they have volunteered and made themselves available. So any member who feels like they need some mental health support, that's available. Sometimes it's just a call. It's certainly not replacing formal therapy or anything like that. So I have found that has been a very effective way of having members stay connected. On the virtual engagement of participation, which is a challenge, as I think we've all experienced, our video team came up with a relatively simple, but what has wound up being a very effective idea that boosted participation by, I'll say, at least a third, which is when we put the tracks out for folks to participate, he's already stitched together Ruben conducting them, so that when you're listening to the track and you have it on your first device, you're seeing the person who you're used to seeing conduct. And we've laid in karaoke style the words, so that from a singer perspective, your focus is only on one thing. You're looking at one device rather than the device, and then the music, and then, oh, he told me to look in the camera and smile and be happy. So, what we've tried to do is sort of simplify that. It makes the prep work, incredibly complicated, but we saw a huge pop in participation. And at the same time, we have a percentage of our membership that are not comfortable with technology. And after consulting with the city, which has, our city has a very strict regulation around inside singing and even outside singing, we set up a virtual video booth right in the office. So sign up, come in, we clean it after each person, blah, blah, blah. And all you have to do is come in, look at the camera. We have the projection up. You tell me which voice part you want. We sanitize the earphones each time and you put it in, and literally they come in, they do their 3-minute bit. Next, we sanitize, and the next group. And that also had a lovely little pop of participation.
Great, thank you. I'm going to put a fermata on that, just with an eye on the clock. Although none of us had sanitized in our job descriptions before this, and I think we all do now. I want to move to think about our organizations, their health and leadership. And I'm going to start with Jeff and Michael, and then everyone else can join in. And I'm thinking sort of about board leadership here. How are boards navigating the push and pull of dealing with the right now, with the sense of crisis that we're dealing with, and the need to plan for the future or an unknown future? So I'm curious where you think boards and leadership should be or are spending their energy right now.
I'll start. I think, for our board, initially what they're going to be doing is, and we've talked about this in the last question here with some of you, is that they're going to be contacting all of our current roster of singers individually, and again, do a check-in. And especially it's good because we've been fortunate to bring in some new board members to fill in our ranks, and this is a way for them to get comfortable with the singing roster as well. Last year, it was just mostly mitigation, and seeing that the focus was on the finances, and making sure that we were doing whatever we could to stay afloat, stay viable, so we could get into 2021, where I think we were all hoping we were going to be rehearsing, right? We were all going to be getting back together again. And for this year, for the board's focus is on crafting what some sort of virtual season could look like for us, and understanding that we need to answer that question in order to plan for the year in general. We've decided that we need something very concrete and focused to work on, and that's one way we're going about it. In addition to that, it's an additional emphasis on what we've always have asked our board members to do, focusing on fundraising and getting out there and connecting, and not only contacting our singers, but contacting our donors, just, staying as connected as possible. And, that for us is just the focus on that. For smaller choruses, especially some of our smaller choruses that would just have not been able to do much, if anything, last year, perhaps a focus on keeping up to date on, again, health guidelines and things like that to guide their decisions, looking for ways to at least focus on the care of the singers and making sure that they are okay as best you can.
Yeah, and I guess, Steve, are you speaking from GALA Choruses board, or my San Francisco, or anything that comes to mind? I see you're just saying go for it. Well, I'll speak from the GALA Choruses perspective, and then maybe speak a little bit of what I'm understanding is happening in San Francisco. Obviously, Chris is intimately involved with that. I think as GALA Choruses, and as all of you know, we are encouraging our choruses, trying to be as supportive as we can, and making sure that all of the resources that we have are brought to bear, that people can take advantage of. Of course, it's an incredibly challenging time. I mean, we just put our ask out and have asked those who had registered for Festival 2020 to at least consider taking that registration and trying to convert that into a GALA donation. And we've had a great uptick on that, which has been wonderful to see. We want to kind of really take a close look at our sort of like relevance. And that is something that I think any organization should always be doing, but it has been brought into sharper frame that that's something that we need to continue to look at. And the programs that are doing well, whether it's our resources center and how we can sort of provide resources to help, whether it's new choruses or longstanding choruses, sort of cope through the pandemic, spreading things we're learning from folks just like yourself and making sure that that's available. The 411 program continues actually apace. Certainly Eve can speak to that, and Kathleen, people who are helping out in that capacity, even if choruses are not performing, thinking about what their worlds will look like when they do perform, how to continue to engage singers in this sort of feelingly endless sort of spin cycle we're in right now is something that's incredibly important. Interestingly, right as this was happening and we all stopped singing, this was sort of right on the heels of a lot of social unrest. And with our New Harmony Task Force and our workbook, we know a lot of choruses were sort of doing some introspection as to how they were sort of really amplifying DEI efforts and making sure that voices were not just in the room or at the table, but were being heard and leading those conversations. That shouldn't and can't stop, even though we're in the midst of a pandemic. Chorus is not singing, but what does that look like? How do you sort of capture people's attention when there's so many competing things going on in their lives? So we are hearing loudly and clearly from choruses about who's singing, who isn't, who needs more support or not, and people bluntly asking, Gala, what have you done for me lately? And we need to be and have a clear focus on making sure that that message is unwavering. It's not so complicated that people have to sort of thumb through pages and pages. This needs to be bulleted. So it's very clear. Here's how we can help you. Even if you're not singing now, if you're thinking about singing, if you're planning to sing in the next sort of chunk of time, we want to be there to support you.
You know, Michael, you raise a good point about diversity and inclusion, because that's one of the areas that we have been looking at as well. And I like to position it as, you know, take this moment as a gift of time that we've never really had. Our strategic plan, all of our strategic planning that we tend to do, that plan tends to crop up, you know, just sit in a corner somewhere, and we never get time to work on it because we're putting together shows, we're doing all the things that we do. Now is the time to really start looking at that. And, you know, that's something that our board has embraced as well, because there are things you can be working on in your strategic planning that, yes, are they dependent on getting back to some sort of normal? Of course they are, but there's still opportunities to look at how we do things and how we can make things better for our singers.
I'm going to piggyback right on what Jeff's saying, because the importance of strategic planning, I think, has proven itself, at least for our organization, in this time. So in the middle of March, like everybody else, we canceled our concert, and 2 weeks later we canceled our June concert, and 2 weeks later we released our first virtual video. So we did that because as soon as it became clear that in-person performance was no longer viable, rather than just sort of sitting back and saying, I wonder what we would do, first thing that we did as an organization is we opened up our strategic plan. And there's some stuff that was sitting out there 2, 3, 4 years. There's some stuff that was sitting in the parking lot, the wish list. But we had already talked about it. We had already thought about it, and it formed what we then operationalized out of the gate. So what that left for board leadership for the last 8 or 9 months is twofold. The first, many months of continual contingency planning. What if this? What if this? So I have like A through Z different various budgets that we've all sort of reviewed. And so that is a natural part of the fiduciary review. But again, taking what Jeff was talking about, the quote unquote gift of time, and said, look, as a board, aside from oversight, your primary responsibility is bringing in dough and helping us raise money. And so each board member has now a personalized development plan that is built off of the organizational development plan. And we actually have had months of follow-up and engagement and making sure that it's implemented. And the level of result is unparalleled for this board in terms of what they've been able to produce. So that's where our leadership focus has been at the board level.
I want to pop in just a minute on this board stuff. Initially, for some of the small to mid-sized choruses, I was seeing, a lot of investment and, trying to get through the holiday with a virtual concert, and they're really getting exhausted. I've had several groups reach out to me just in the last, 4 to 6 weeks about, I don't think we're going to be able to operate the way that we've been operating. If we continue to pay our artistic director come fall, when maybe we can come back together, we're not going to have any money. So it's a little bit different situation for some of the smaller groups that aren't as sophisticated perhaps in some of their practices. So that's one thing. The other thing is I've lost 4 to 5 board members since last March, and I had gone into the Bloomberg Philanthropy program with board development as my objective, and had fully staffed my board with what I'd learned, and really and then lost a third of them. And it was very legitimate stuff. 2 deaths. One person was so depressed that they were barely, able to keep their job. Somebody moved out of state. So it's legitimate issues, but I've lost a lot of board members. But the ones who remained have really done exactly what Craig just talked about. We've initiated a pretty, for us, nice stewardship program, reaching out to donors, individually, just a typical stewardship program that we had certainly not utilized before. And then also just being really hunkering down on our strategic plan. Voices of Note is 40 years old. The men's chorus now almost in their 41st year. And the policies, I know they've had them through the years, but I can't find them. So we've had to sit down and rewrite all our policies. And oh my God, getting the board to do that prior was really difficult. I had 2 governance committees and no policies. But with this time, we really have made a huge dent in correcting that issue for this organization. So yeah, it's a good time to do that kind of stuff. For me personally, I've got 2 choruses. I'm the only administrative staff member. All of this has created more work for me than pre-COVID, because everything, not everything, but it feels like everything is such a huge learning curve, because there's so much that we're having to do differently with our programming, our ticketing, our rehearsal, keeping people working well and playing well with one another, and not fussing and fighting and stressed out. I mean, that's a result of stress. So I feel like my job has been probably the most difficult in my 30-something years with working within this GALA chorus context. It's really been, it's been a lot. Have we managed? Yes, we have managed. So
I'm going to jump in because we're going to run out of time in a minute. So I'm going to focus on one question and let everyone take a quick shot at it, and then we'll wrap up. And we've talked about in the sort of year that we've not been singing together. I mean, we've had the COVID and health crisis and all of the trauma that comes with that. We've had the social justice crisis, and we've had the sort of democracy under attack crisis. And any of those topics would have filled up our concerts for a year. So I'm just curious for each of you, from where you sit, what do you think our members and audiences, to the degree that we can communicate with them, need from us in the next 6 months?
well, I'm just going to jump in. Hope, joy, hope and joy, and a sense that things are going to be okay in as much as we can provide that comfort. But my sense, talking with my donors and my audience members, is they need a relief and joy and hope.
That leads perfectly into, I planned my coming season around 3 words, which were hope, joy, and resilience. And literally all of my programming revolves around that. I would say that so many people are craving community and normalcy and trying to just adapt to things how they are. I would encourage everyone, especially those groups, and even the people who are not putting together, they're not producing virtual things. We have been asked by many, many community organizations for footage for their online programming. We've probably been averaging, one performance a month and we either give them a new production or old footage. There's still involvement to be had. I know it might feel a little more distant for the individual member, but we still have a community out there in addition to taking care of those inside our organization.
I'll say, in addition to, I think, what both Kathleen and Eve have mentioned, and it is the continued stewardship and caring of our audience and donors and the communities at large that we connect with, especially young people, because we have a robust youth education program, which we have now sort of transferred into the virtual space. But it's also the hope, which has been brought up, of the art that is to come, right? Of the fact that there will be a moment where we will all be back on stage together. And what does that moment even look like? And I think we all here would agree that art. Aristotle, said 2,500 years ago, Aristotle said that the function of art is catharsis, right? And so how do we take what we do and address the last 2 years of what Steve laid out, of democracy and demise, of the social justice movements that we've seen, and of course of COVID, and provide a space for our audiences to start to work through that PTSD, as well as our singers. And I'm excited to say, I know that we're looking at how we're doing that, and our artistic director is embarking on a really aggressive adventure to do that, as he does, as you all know, Tim does. But it's very exciting, and I think once we are able to announce that, it will give people that hope that it's not just that we're coming back, but we're coming back with something new, and we're here to help you heal.
Yeah, the word I would add to hope and joy is love. And that embodies all of our messaging, and we continue to communicate that in our digital offerings, and certainly at the time that it's safe to do it in person. I'm confident that our programming will offer that as well.
If I could add to that, again, it's I think what we're saying here is recommit to the values of your organization, and take a look at that mission statement. And for those of us who can't do anything virtual, if we can't engage in the arts in this moment, and there are many of us out there who can't, look at that mission statement, and where it says where you're doing something through music, substitute through music with something else, or add on to something else. What else can you do to support the communities that we would normally support and nurture through our music? There are other ways we can engage, and just look for those and celebrate the fact that despite the challenges that we have, that we can't perform as we're normally able to, there can be other ways that we can get out there and support our communities as representatives of the GALA movement.
Anyone else want to jump in? So I'll have us wrap up, and to use Kathleen's phrase, you can choose your own adventure. In just a few words, either tell us something that's giving you personally hope or inspiration right now, or just a piece of encouragement or wisdom that you'd like to share with your colleagues. And we'll start with Jeff.
Boy, I guess, again, I look back at this idea of the gift of time. You know, we have an opportunity to really take some time to do some very deep, meaningful thinking, internal processing of what we want our organizations to do in the future. And I guess on a personal level, I said, thank God for Dr. Fauci. You know, I mean, if there has ever been an example of where fact and concrete evidence and science has been needed, it's been with him. I mean, you know, it's just being able to fall back on him and other sources to, despite what I'm reading in social media, here's what's actually going on, here's what I really need to be concerned about. That has been so helpful, because even when the news has been bad, as long as I know it's accurate, I can respond to that and react to that. And that's so he and all those heroes out there like him.
Michael,
I'm going to piggyback. Oh,
okay,
I'm sorry.
Please.
I was just going to piggyback on Jeff because he brought up Dr. Fauci and he was in my top three. But he wasn't three. So I'll be really honest and transparent. I've been waiting for January 20th for over 4 years. And it's not just the it is not just that someone will be leaving office, but it is the incoming administration and the promise of being able to address this pandemic, and the promise of actually supporting arts and cultural and our LGBT community. There is so much in there that there is to be hopeful for, and even just being able to go to whitehouse.gov and have, you know, an LGBTQ page again. So that is my inspiration.
Michael?
Sure. I will echo the messages of my brethren before me. But I think just looking at SFGMC, when I think about the last coming up on a year, it is social media, but I watch our support of each other on our member page, sort of watching as some people have fallen ill with COVID, people have lost partners and family members, some people have moved, and really seeing that community, even in that online space, come together and let a lot of the sort of like the trivialities and the pettiness that, you know, that can certainly pop up in gay men's choruses. A lot of that has just gone by the wayside, and people are just like, we got shit to focus on that's far more important than some of that. So let's be there for each other. Let's prop each other up. Let's mourn. Let's celebrate. Let's laugh. Let's kiki. Let's still try and find a way to kind of push through and just sort of, as the song and testimony, hang in and hang on. That's all we can do.
Absolutely. Kathleen?
What comes to my mind strongest are the lyrics to the Melanie DeMore song, "Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. And don't give up hope, you're not alone." And even a later verse, "I know you're scared, I'm scared too, but here I am right next to you." If you don't know that, it's in the Justice Choir songbook, but I think just keep moving forward and doing so with hope and resilience and love and all of those things.
Great. Craig?
During the month of December, I watched, I believe, 16 different Gala Chorus holiday offerings. And having music in my life, having the message of acceptance from all types of groups, from large groups like San Francisco and Seattle to very, very small groups, brought the three words that I talked about to life of hope, joy, and love.
Holly?
Yeah, for me, it's really just, wow, art against all odds. I mean, I didn't know, I knew how much my singers cared about it, but I hadn't really internalized that until I see how hard they're willing to work to do something they don't know how to do, for us to create something and still be together in some kind of way. And I was, and continue to be profoundly moved by that.
Mhm.
Eve?
The thing that's given me hope is the election. To have real people in the White House, people who actually care about other human beings, is, I think, going to be an amazing breath of fresh air. I love what Kathleen and I are kind of, I think, channeling the same kind of stuff. You know, for me, the staying positive and not losing faith has had to fall on me letting go of stuff I can't control. There's, I can vote, but beyond that action and encouraging others to vote, I really couldn't do anything else. I can't do anything about what happened at the White House except through our messaging, our mission, the music that we bring, promote unity, love, hope. And also just for me personally, I have had to let go of things that I truly have no control over. So that's helped my sanity. But yeah, these courses are amazing instruments of change and hope and love. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Eve. And for me, it's more an observation, but so often where people think about putting on the show and the final product and the quality of it and wanting to wow people. And this is a time when I think we also have the power to bring people into the process, members and audiences, where just sharing what we're doing, a work in progress, sharing a piece of music that we love, maybe we don't even sing it ourselves. I think there is so much that we could do to leverage our audiences to support the mission, the ideas behind our mission, that doesn't have to be what we produce, but what's in our heart. So that's where I would leave us. I want to thank each of you for taking time out of your day. I know everyone has Zoom fatigue or just many meetings. Really glad to hear what's going on with you. I'm both happy and sadder than ever that I'm not in the same room with all of you, but we will be soon enough. And thank you. By all means, GALA will be updating our COVID resources page as often as we can with new stuff. And if GALA can help you think about this, contact GALA and they will funnel your question to a person that can give you help or at least good advice. So thanks to all of you and thanks to everyone out there.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.